We shall commence this module by studying the concept of institutional finance. Many economists such as Keynes, Schumpeter, Gerschenkron, Gurley and Shaw, Cameron, etc. have emphasized the role of finance for economic development. Schumpeter in 1934 observed that the role of finance in economic development is amply clear as there is emphasis on the significance of credit in every textbook. He observed that the structure of modern industry could not have been erected without finance. According to Schumpeter, the services provided by the financial intermediaries such as mobilization of savings, evaluation of projects, management of risk, monitoring of firms, managers and facilitation of transactions in economic activities are essential for the technological innovations and economic development. Famous economist Minsky in 1982 also argued that finance and financial relationships are fundamental because they oxygenate economic units, allowing them to purchase without previous savings, and they make growth and structural transformation possible by providing current purchasing power to those who would use it to expand the boundaries of the system. In the context of the role of finance and financial intermediaries in the economic development, the institutional finance has a significant role in the economic development of a country. Institutional finance stands for the finance that arises from the institutional sources. Institutional sources primarily consist of commercial banks and specialized banks such as industrial developmental banks and agricultural development banks, housing development banks, etc. Institutional finance promotes the industrial development, agricultural development, housing development, rural development and infrastructural development, and these are considered as the source of economic development. After studying this module, you shall be able to understand the concept of institutional finances, rationale behind institutional finances, significance of institutional finance in India, past and present status of institutional finance in India, effect of financial liberalization on the institutional finance in India. Let us now understand the rationale for institutional finance. The rationale for institutional finance goes back to the time when some of the European countries such as Germany and Italy, etc. missed the industrial progress at the pace of England's industrialization. These countries were confronted with shortages of capital and entrepreneurship that plays a vital role in industrialization. In their effort to develop economically, these countries wanted to establish corporate enterprises, financial markets and other infrastructural components with railways, canals, etc., which played crucial roles in the economic transformation of these countries. To achieve that transformation, they felt the need for specialized financial institutions. Such financial institutions emerged on the European continent during the 19th century. The foremost old specialized financial institution was established in 1822 in Belgium, known as the Société Générale de Belgique. The specific objective of this financial institution was financing and promoting the development through the prosperity of agriculture, manufactures and commerce. Calder provided strong grounds to support industrialization to accelerate the economic growth in any country. The Calder's first law states that the faster the rate of growth of manufacturing in an economy, the faster will be the growth of its GDP. Instead of simply being a correlation between the two variables, Calder regarded the relationship as fundamentally a causal one, the causation running from the growth of manufacturing production to the growth of GDP. Industrial development is also considered important because it pulls surplus labor resources from the agricultural sector, thereby raising the productivity and per capita income even in the agriculture sector. Further, beyond a point, even agriculture growth becomes dependent upon the availability of the certain manufactured inputs such as machines, chemicals, fertilizers and pesticides. Industrial development is also important because as per the Engel's law, the demand for non-food commodities grows and diversifies as the income grows. Role of institutional finance can also be understood by looking at certain functions which are assigned to the financial institutions. These functions include banking functions, development functions, promotional functions, fostering of capital market, project appraisal and the supervision of assisted economic entity. The role of specialized financial institutions is visualized an important one in pushing the industrial development as they form an important source of primary long-term finance. The long-term lending is an important constituent of the banking function. The existence of commercial banks, which are primarily the source of the short-term finance, complements the role of specialized finance in financing the industrial development and therefore the economic development. The existence of financial institutions creates an environment in which the new entrepreneurs can convert their potentialities into the real contributions to the economy by expanding the production base, provided they are well supported by the finance for their financial and industrial ventures. The promotion of enterprises by assisting the potential entrepreneurs with financial and non-financial inputs constitutes the promotional role of financial institutions. The capital market constitutes an important segment for financing economic activities. Financial institutions' involvement in the capital market raises the confidence of the public in it. It is primarily based on the factor that financial institutions are better placed as compared to an individual investors in terms of extracting the correct information about a project, and hence financial institutions' involvement raises the credibility of the project that helps the project to mobilize funds from the public. Given the advantage of financial institutions for their own technically and managerially capable manpower, the project appraisal by the financial institutions assist the potential entrepreneurs to identify the weaknesses of the project, and thereby it helps in taking an informed decision by the entrepreneurs. Post-dispersal supervision by the financial institutions helps the assisted enterprises to rectify in their operations if they succumb to certain problems. In fact, the task of post-dispersal supervision ensures the participation of financial institutions in the governance of assisted enterprises, and that works advantageously for the firm. Now, we will move on to discuss the evolution of institutional finance in India, the pre-financial liberalization scenario. The economy that the British colonial rulers had handed over to the government of newly independent India in 1947 had been much exploited for its resources and damaged in terms of its industrial structure. The need for initiating the economic development virtually from scratch created the need for systematically planning economic progress. The launch of 5-year plans reflected the pursuit of that goal by the Government of India. Since finance is an important requirement for the economic development, the creation of appropriate financial institutions was an important part of the agenda of the independent Government of India. Financial institutions were seen as essential to boost up the economic activities, particularly on the industrial front, which required long-term and medium-term finance, entrepreneurship, technology, marketing, managerial skills and research to identify and initiate the industrial projects. Most of these existed on very limited scale in India at the time of independence. In fact, most of the banks which existed were under the private sector and owned by the industrial houses, and these industrial houses used banks to finance mostly their own ventures. Such banks were not subjected to the professional regulatory framework, and hence many of them tended to fail or merged with their stronger counterparts. The underdevelopment of the financial system in India at the time of independence was that the Reserve Bank was also not completely operational by the government until it was nationalized by the Reserve Bank of India Act of 1948. The practice of existing commercial banks in India with regard to industrial finance was largely according to the British tradition of commercial banking, which primarily financed the need of working capital of industries. Such situation entails the setting up of financial institutions at a greater scale. The first All India financial institution, the Industrial Finance Corporation of India, that is IFCI, was set up on 1st July 1948 in the direction of having an organized financial system to meet the need of institutional finance for industrial development in India. The main objective of IFCI becomes clear from the preamble to the IFCI Act of 1948, which says that the IFCI is created to make medium and long-term credits more readily available to the industrial concerns in India, particularly in the circumstances where the normal banking accommodation is inappropriate or recourse to capital issue method is impracticable. Immediately after the establishment of IFCI, the Government of India passed the State Financial Corporation Act in 1951, which led to the establishment of 18 state financial corporations by the different state governments to cater to the financial needs of the medium and the small scale industries in the respective states. The significance of institutional finance emanating from the SFCs is that the majority of it went to the small scale units. This is substantiated by the data on the financial assistance by the SFCs for 1977-78. The data shows that more than 90% of the beneficiaries of the assistance were small scale units, and the amount going to the small scale units constituted 60% of the total loan amount by them. Passing of the SFCs Act of 1951 was followed by the establishment of the Industrial Credit and Investment Corporation of India, that is ICICI, in 1955. The ICICI was expressly established for the purpose of assisting industrial enterprises in the private sector across India. The foremost vital source of institutional finance for industries of every type was the Industrial Developmental Bank of India, that is IDBI, which was established under the ownership of the RBI in 1964 under the IDBI Act of 1964. The IDBI not only offered the financial assistance directly to the industries concerns, but it also refinanced the commercial banks and the other financial institutions for their financial assistance to the industries. It also coordinated among all financial institutions for direction of institutional finance to desired areas set up by the state. One more segment of financial institutions in India has been State Industrial Developmental Corporations, that is SIDCs, which were set up different states under the Companies Act of 1956. The reason for setting up of SIDCs was based on the fact that the SFCs were under the dual ownership of respective state and the RBI. The SIDCs were also set up to complement the role of institutional finance by the SFCs. By late 1970s, the country witnessed establishment of 28 SIDCs across different states. To rehabilitate and modernize the sick industries, the Government of India insisted the establishment of Industrial Refinance Corporation of India, that is IRCI, under the combined effort of IDBI, IFCI, ICICI, LIC and scheduled commercial banks. The assistance of the IRCI has been made available to different segments of industries in the form of loans, direct subscription of equity of concerned industries, underwriting of equity and guarantees of issues by the companies. Finally, we witnessed the establishment of the Small Industrial Development Bank of India, that is SIDBI, under the SIDBI Act of 1989 as the principal financial institution for the promotion, financing and development of industry in the small, tiny and cottage sectors and for coordinating the functions of the institutions engaged in the similar activities. It commenced its operations on April 2nd, 1990 by taking over the outstanding portfolio and activities of the IDBI pertaining to the small scale sector. There were some other financial institutions which were set up with specific objectives and became source of institutional finance. The expansion of the number of financial institutions also resulted in the quantitative growth of the financial assistance to different segments of industries. Annual average of financial assistance by all financial institutions AFIs increased from rupees 2.7 crores during the pre-plan period of 1948-51 to rupees 24.2 crores during the second plan from 1956-61. This annual average of financial assistance further increased to rupees 309.4 during the fourth plan from 1969 to 74. Major jump in the financial assistance by the AFIs was observed since late 1970s, indicating a major role of state in using the financial system for increasing the productive capacity in the economy. Such increase of financial assistance by the AFIs was not only visible in terms of its absolute value, but also as a percentage of real economic variables. Reveals about the rise of financial assistance by the AFIs as percentage of gross capital formation in the private sector. The share of financial assistance sanctioned by the AFIs as a percentage of gross capital formation increased from 4.5% during the first 5-year plan to 59.1% during the 7th 5-year plan. Another source of institutional finance was commercial banking in India. Total outstanding advances by the scheduled commercial banks increased from rupees 547 crores in 1950-51 to rupees 1336 crores in 1960-61. However, the major jump in the advances by the commercial banks took place since 1970-71 onwards, causing the jump of outstanding advances to rupees 25,371 crores in 1980-81 and further to rupees 1,16,301 crores in 1990-91. This was essentially a result of nationalization of commercial banks, which led to the expansion of branches of commercial banks even in the rural belt and making available to the agriculture sector and non-farm economic activities. The maximum share of credit advances by the commercial banks went to the industries, but that credit was mostly in the form of short-term finance. Now, we will look into the post-financial liberalization performance of the institutional finance in India. Indian economy witnessed a new era of economic paradigm since 1991, characterized by greater role for market. Such paradigm was a result of economic liberalization in the financial sector and the real sector. Financial sector liberalization, which is also termed as financial liberalization, brought dramatic changes in the financial sector in terms of financial instruments and financial intermediaries. The financial liberalization was also characterized by not only giving greater scope to the market in credit flows from the financial institutions, but also the foreign finance was also allowed greater space in the financial system of the economy. The SEBI in 1992 was an attempt to give boost to the stock market activities. The promotion of stock market was considered to give alternate options to the firms to raise funds for their financial requirements. The statutory norms in the terms of SLRs and CRRs were softened to increase more funds in account of commercial banks. This was an attempt to bring market element in the functioning of commercial banks. Banks and financial institutions were subjected to capital adequacy norms, which were meant to improve their viability in the market arena. Financial liberalization also emphasized the phase out of concessional funds available to certain financial institutions for carrying out development objectives. The recommendations of the Narasimha Committee II in 1997 and further a working group on harmonizing the role and operations and development financial institutions and banks under the chairmanship of S.H. Khan in 1999 outlined the path for changing the characters of sources of institutional finance more on the line of homogenization of functioning and greater degree of competition. Overall, there was a rise in the financial resources meant for the industries, but The pattern of sources was under change during the financial liberalization. During 10th five-year plan, there was a steep decline in the financial assistance by the AFIs. This was entirely due to the conversion of the ICICI and IDBI into commercial banks during 2002 and 2005 respectively. These two development financial institutions constituted close to 60% of the financial assistance sanctioned by AFIs. Due to the conversion of IDBI into commercial bank through a reverse merger of the IDBI with its own created IDBI bank in 2005, the financial backbone of SFCs and SIDCs was weakened, that led to the decline in the lending of SFCs and SIDCs as well. The major contribution to the assistance by AFIs during the 10th five-year plan and the 11th five-year plan came primarily from the LIC. In fact, in 2003 and 4, 54% of assistance sanctioned by the AFIs came from LIC. The rest amount came from SIDBI, GIC and other specialized financial institutions. However, there was a decline in the role of AFIs in the capital formation in the private sector, as the share of AFIs assistance was as a percentage of gross capital formation in the private corporate sector declined from 75% during 9th five-year plan to 8% during the 10th and in the 11th five-year plan. The post-financial liberalization period observed increasing role of commercial banks with respect to the financial resources to different segment of economy, including industries. The commercial banks lending has spurted up tremendously after 2003 and 4, highlighting the increasing space for commercial banks in institutional finance. In fact, the share of outstanding credit by the commercial banks as a percentage of India's GDP has also increased from 20.7% in 1955-56 to 29.6% in 2003 and 4, and then further to 50.6% in 2010 and 11. Such rise of commercial banks and fall of AFIs have resulted into changing source of finance for the industries. Share of AFIs in the total source of funds for industries came down from 5.6% in 2000-2001 to 1.4% in 2010-11. While on the other hand, the share of commercial banks increased from 0.9% in 2000-2001 to 4% in 2010-11. The rise of commercial banks as a source of institutional finance during the financial liberalization has also been accompanied by a rise of other sources of finance. These are the stock market and the external financial resources in the form of ADRs or GDRs and external commercial borrowings, that is ECBs. The commercial banks and the other sources of finance have created competitive pressure on the AFIs to change their pattern of lending, also lose their developmental characteristics. Growing role of stock market in industrial finance is evident from the fact that market capitalization and public issues both have increased during the post-financial liberalization period. Market capitalization increased from rupees 1,88,146 crores in 1992-93 to rupees 61,64,157 crores in 2009 and 10. And similarly, amount raised by firms through the public issues has also increased from rupees 19,803 crores in 1992-93 to rupees 57,555 crores in 2009 and 10. Now, we will summarize what we have studied in this module. Role of institutional finance in economic development has been identified by many economists, which is based on the fact that industrialization is crucial for the economic growth and there is a need of long-term and short-term finance for the industries that has to be met by incorporating and promoting the financial institutions. The role of government has been identified as crucial because the state can ensure the availability of finance to the important economic activities and the important geographical locations with appropriate guidelines and financial incentives to the financial institutions. Based on the experiences of the developed nations, the Government of India has also established many financial institutions with different objectives, but primarily to boost the industrialization in India. The beginning in the direction of establishing financial institutions was made by setting up of IFCI. The post-independence India observed rising role of institutional finance in the Indian economy. The share of AFI's financial assistance increased from 4.5% of the gross capital formation in the private sector in the first 5-year plan to 59.1% during the 7th 5-year plan. This was an indicator of the role of institutional finance in the capital formation of economy. The start of financial liberalization in 1992 brought structural changes in the institutional finance. Commercial banks grew exponentially while the AFIs, which progressed on the financial incentives of the state, witnessed decline due to the growing competition from the other sources of finance and also the withdrawal of state financial support to such financial institutions. The major drawbacks of the new structure of the institutional finance during the post-financial liberalization period arise on the count of two facts. Firstly, the over-dependence of industrial finance on the commercial bank is problematic because commercial banks' liabilities consist mostly short-term deposits and hence the commercial banks' overindulgence in the long-term financing carries potentialities of the banking crisis. Secondly, the stock market and the external sources of finance such as ADRs, GDRs and ECBs are unreliable sources of the industrial finance and therefore not suitable for a stable industrial growth and hence the stable economic growth of the country.